Hi, everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with Trish and Mimi Ang about their empowering and transformative home birth experience. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. My name is Rebecca Decker, and I'm a nurse with my PhD and the founder of Evidence-Based Birth. Join me each week as we work together to get evidence-based information into the hands of families and professionals around the world. As a reminder, this information is not medical advice. See ebbirth.com/disclaimer for more details. Hi everyone, yesterday was the start of Pride Month and we have some special episodes planned for all of you here at Evidence-Based Birth. We're thrilled to kick off Pride Month today with an amazing birth story from Trish and Mimi Ang. Trish, pronouns she, her, and Mimi Ang, pronouns she, her, are first-time parents to baby boy Aspen Kai and graduates of the EBB Childbirth Class with Shalin Butterworth. Mimi gave birth in their home in Davis, California in March 2021 amidst the pandemic. Mimi and Trish fell in love 3 years ago over rock climbing and bumped up their home insemination plans last year due to COVID and their, quote, geriatric eggs. Mimi works in biotech as a senior manager of operations, and Trish is an engineering manager at Slack. Welcome, Trish and Mimi, to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here to share our story. This is Mimi.
And yeah, thanks so much. This is Trish, and really glad to be here.
So could you all tell me a little bit about how your plans changed from the pandemic? I think that there was some just things that changed due to COVID. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd scheduled our wedding for 7/11. We thought it was a lucky date in 2020, and we were really excited for it. The interesting thing is that Mimi's parents were in China once the beginning of the pandemic started, and we were like, oh no, we might have to, adjust things because their parents might not be able to come, like they were in lockdown over there. And we didn't even anticipate it was going to spread to the States, and then the States were going to be like way worse. So I think March hit and then April, and we were still like, well, maybe we can push it to September. And then it really hit us and we were like, no, that's not happening this year. The other thing is that we had been planning to go to the Tokyo Olympics for our honeymoon because it's the first year for climbing, and that also went out the window. So with all of that, we were like, I guess we should skip to step 3, which is we were going to try and get pregnant after our honeymoon, like after coming back from our honeymoon. For us, we have several queer friend couples who have just really struggled. I get even straight couple friends who've taken a year or more to get pregnant. So we were like, it just wouldn't hurt to see what the options are and start the process. And that's kind of kicked off for us around May or June of 2020.
Mm-hmm. Were you worried? Were you worried at all? Because I know you mentioned, about the egg issue in your intro that you sent me.
Yeah, we were both 36 at the time. I'm 37 now, and my eggs were only getting older. And we went in for fertility testing, and we got all the normal fertility results were fine. But then when I went in to count my eggs, I had a cyst in one of my ovaries, and then it only had 5 follicles, whereas Trish had 13 or something like that.
And yeah, we were pretty lucky. All this fertility testing, because we hadn't really heard of it, but they were offered through my work. So definitely felt privileged to explore these options at all. And because of that, it really determined which of us would go first. I think we'd been planning to have 2 kids in long term, and from the moment I met Mimi, she was like, I want to have kids and I want to carry kids. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And she eventually kind of maybe talked me into considering the option. I definitely was not as excited about going through childbirth. But yeah, so we decided we should move forward with her getting pregnant first. And then as part of that, we were exploring potential donor options. So Mimi is Chinese and I'm Filipino, and we wanted our baby to kind of reflect that. So actually, with Mimi going first, we are really lucky that we have a close friend who's kind of like a big brother to me, and he's Filipino and a climber and an awesome guy. And he was willing to be a known donor for us. So it's pretty lucky. Just thinking through, for most other folks, they have to find an anonymous donor on a sperm bank kind of website, and
which we looked into as well.
Yeah,
but there were very few choices.
And it's like extremely expensive. Plus, the sperm is frozen, so it decreases like the viability by, I forget what the percentage is, like 60%. So something ridiculous.
What is the price typically that you were quoted for the anonymous donor sperm?
Well, each IUI injection would have been like $1,200. Yeah.
And then if you want things on top of that, then yeah, it just like the price just increases from there. So yeah, we thought we would just kind of try our luck with the quote unquote turkey baster method to start. So once we determined that, we did a little bit of paperwork around setting up a known donor agreement with our friend. And then the other snag was that this was still the middle of the COVID lockdown, and our friend lives up at the Canadian border, basically at the edge of Washington, like northern Washington, and we're in California, so it's like a 12-hour drive or more.
I think it was like 16 hours.
16-hour drive. So like normally when we had considered this at first, we were like, oh, we would just fly back and forth, and like that went out the window. So we started researching how to do at-home insemination. Mimi watched a ton of YouTube videos.
Yeah, I just wanted to optimize it so that we didn't have to make so many of these trips.
Yeah.
Because if we were gonna get pregnant and then have our wedding, I didn't want to be super pregnant by the time our wedding came around still. So when we decided to start in May, we had all the ducks in a row. Like we made sure that we had syringes and cups and pineapple and pre-seed lube and making sure that all was ready to go. We knew how to use all the tools. It was a lot of YouTube education.
So you mostly did a lot of self-education, which I feel like 10 years ago, there wasn't as much information easily accessible about self-insemination. But you felt like you were able to find a lot of information to help you.
Yeah.
It was really funny. There was like one YouTube tip that was like, definitely eat pineapple after doing the insemination to like seal the deal. And
definitely have an orgasm because that helps the sperm go up.
With the contractions or something. But so it was pretty great. I think it was helpful. And we used an ovulation, one of those thermometers to just check for basal temperature and like figure out when would be the optimal week we should drive up and try things out.
And I had been tracking my cycle for about 3 months at the time. And my cycles are pretty regular, so we went up within like a week window of my ovulation, and it was, pretty spot on. My ovulation was on a Saturday, and we tried on a Wednesday, a Friday, and a Saturday. And luckily, we got it on the first try.
So a couple weeks later, you had a positive pregnancy test.
Yeah. We came back Juneteenth. We were going out for a
Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah, a protest actually, and then we took the test right after, and we wanted to be safe, and so we stayed in the car with the protesting. But then right after we took the test and found out we were positive. And I took the test 3 times after. It was
we're
for
just
sure.
Like, no way. Like this like could not happen. And we joked that it was Mimi's frugal ovaries.
I'm Chinese.
She like really wanted us to not have
wanted to save money.
Yeah, wanted to save money.
We didn't want to go make the trip again.
Or like have to resort to an IVF or anything like that down the line. So
yeah, we were very surprised.
Yeah, really just felt grateful that it worked out, and it just kind of felt like meant to be almost.
It sounds like it went amazingly smooth for the process.
Yeah, we really couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because right after, we were supposed to take another fertility test to make sure that my fallopian tubes weren't blocked from the cyst stuff. And we actually just canceled all those tests that we're following.
Did you find that care providers were helpful in helping talk with you about this, or do they not talk with you about it that much, or were they not that knowledgeable?
We talked to the fertility clinic folks, and it felt a little, like, for one thing, it felt a little bit weird that we had to do all these tests and they recommended it just because like, we're a queer couple. And then I guess it makes sense because we are a little bit older, but it did feel a little like fear-mongery. Like they were like, no, we have to do like XYZ, otherwise this will like never work. And they were kind of like, okay, yeah, try your thing, but we'll schedule your appointments because of course not, you know?
Yeah. We had already gone through like 3 or 4 different types of testing, like AMH and LH, or I forget what the
different
hormone tests were. But it was a lot of testing.
Yeah. So it sounds like it all worked out in that you were able to bump forward your baby making plans
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
2020 to have a baby in 2021, which ended up being great timing because we're just, there's not much else to do anyways other than to have a baby, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so did our friends.
Yeah.
All of our friends are getting pregnant now
Yeah,
too.
we've had a lot of friends who had babies around this timeline also.
So how did you find out about evidence-based birth and the EBB Childbirth Class?
In October or something, or November,
Yeah.
we were looking for, either continuing with a hospital birth, or we're actually in the middle of moving. I had just gotten a new job in August of 2020, and we had the opportunity to take a relocation up to Vacaville area for my new company. And we considered moving to Davis because it was closer to my parents, who are in Sacramento, and it's about 30 minutes away from them. And so we were going to have to switch providers anyway from Sutter Oakland to Sutter Davis at the time. And my experience really with Sutter Oakland wasn't great. I felt like I was just kind of ushered in and out, and I wasn't given a lot of time to think about my decisions. It was just like, here's what you need to do. Take this test, do a gestational diabetes test, now do another one to make sure you're not diabetic. And I was just thinking, like, there's no way I'm diabetic. Why are you making me do it twice, as an example? So I just felt like I wasn't given the time of day to really talk about my feelings about things. And, I heard a lot of great things about Sutter Davis too, but I think that given my first experience with the OB in Oakland, I really wanted some advocacy for myself and more information. And given that we're like first-time parents, we really didn't know that much. So I first of all looked for a doula just in Davis, knowing that we were going to be moving and that we needed support. And looking for that doula on the web was just, a long list of white presenting cisgendered women in Davis. And I was like, okay, this person seems to have a really cool, like, evidence-based background, and she teaches classes. So let's interview with her. And that person happened to be Shalin Butterworth.
Yeah.
And the moment we met her, first of all, on her website, there was Brooklyn and Huang's testimonial, who are a biracial couple that you actually had on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we were such big fans of their testimonial. And it just sounded like they had a great team, a great doula, and a great experience overall.
Yeah, we were also like really encouraged and just excited to see that Shalin offered a scholarship for BIPOC folks or LGBTQ folks.
Yeah,
and
to take her classes.
We didn't use it because we're like pretty privileged in being able to afford a class without that. But I just think it's like such an important thing, especially like hearing stats from your podcast on like how much it impacts positive outcomes of birth. So I was really, really glad to see that resource.
So we first decided, well, it'd be kind of low commitment just to take this class with her and see what she's like as a person. But then, even before the first class, our first conversation with her, we just felt such a great connection that we signed up to have her as our doula as well.
Yeah.
So
she was just like, I think our first call, she was just so warm, and it felt like we'd known her for years. And she was just like, asked us about our fears and anxieties around home birth and like immediately put us at ease. And I was just like, wow, like my experience with childbirth is I've seen my sister go through too. And I just remember her like curled up in pain and being like, it's okay, it'll be fine. And like not knowing anything past that. So I had a lot of fears, and I especially had a lot of fears that Mimi was considering home birth.
Yeah, what brought you to that, Mimi? Was it your negative experience with the OB and the other town that led you to consider home birth?
A couple of things. Yeah, I had always, in the back of my mind, considered home birth. I think the seed was planted in like 2010 or something when I first watched this documentary called The Business of Being Born. And I think a lot of people kind of like think about it from that perspective of like the healthcare system just not being in your best interest when it comes to birth sometimes. And that previously, like in the 50s, there was a lot more home births than there are now. And now there's a lot more cesareans. And there's, we wonder why that is. And so I always just felt like, maybe a home birth would be a good way to go for me. And then when I became pregnant, I started talking to my family, and a lot of my family members actually had unmedicated births, or actually a cousin of mine had a home birth accidentally. But a lot of them had unmedicated births. And I thought, well, maybe it's okay. Like it runs in my family that I can withstand the pain. And they were healthy enough to do it. And with COVID, I actually had a lot of anxiety about going into the hospital just for my prenatal checkups. And this was like around January 2021 when things were really, really bad. And so I made the decision then to go into a home birth instead of continuing with Sutter Davis, even though I had continued care with Sutter Davis and felt they were great and they would have been just as good, I think, as a backup option.
Yeah. So how did you find a midwife then for the home birth?
We asked our doula, and she recommended a couple of midwives in the area. Then we found Birthstream and Davis, and they were a team of 4 midwives and a student, and they rotated through and kind of acted as backups for each other. And we thought, wow, what a great idea to like have backups in case you have multiple births to go to. And we got to meet each and every one of them, and they were all really kind and spent hours with us at our first meeting.
Night and day between the OB appointments at the Sutter Hospital versus like that one was like a 10-minute in and out type kind of thing. And then our first meeting, I remember with Leslie, I think she came in and like sat on the floor in our bedroom where we were gonna have the home birth and just like talked to us for over an hour, just like kind of exploring like how we felt about things and like how Mimi's been doing throughout her pregnancy, and really like got in touch and like built a trusting relationship. And
and I would say I was not totally convinced I was gonna have a home birth until like after we graduated from EBB. I think that's when I was like, okay, I'm pretty confident that one, I'm healthy enough to do this. You know, I had to be between 37 weeks and 42 weeks. I had to only have one child. They don't do home births with twins. And I had to have an unbreached baby to be able to do it at home. So I was like, those are all, you know, what I am right now. As long as that happens, I can do it at home safely. And 2, I felt like because COVID was just getting worse, I really needed to make the decision to do it at home.
Yeah, because you're right. There was a big surge in California in early 2021.
Yeah.
So what was your experience like taking the EBB class with Shalin?
It was really great. We had all virtual conversations, trainings throughout, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. And Shalin is just all about, you know, sharing her knowledge, but also being super open about answering any questions that we had. So we spent, you know, half the time in the class, like talking through the material, but then half the time just answering questions or coming up, you know, like talking about our anxieties. And there was 5 or 6 people, other couples on the call every time. And so we all got to talk to each other and see what other people's experiences were like as well.
Yeah. I think too, what really resonated for me is all the language was so inclusive, and it was just so refreshing. I think exploring a lot of things both around like getting pregnant and around even just like when we were getting married, everything is so heteronormative, and like people assume like, oh, where's your husband? Who's the dad? Like question mark. And so it was so nice to hear like language like the non-birth parent or like chest feeding, and helped us feel really like welcome in the class. And that was, I also really appreciated hearing like the details on the impact of systemic racism on healthcare and how that affects Black mothers and birthing folks. So it just like really resonated with our values, and all the content was so informative and helped me feel really confident. I'm definitely one of those like passive patients normally in my life where I go into the doctor and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that seems fine. Like, trust their authority.
I'm like the opposite. I'm like the researcher. I have a science and engineering background. And I always do way more research than I need to going into a checkup. And I'm like the doctor's worst nightmare because I'm asking them all these questions that feels challenging to them, I think.
Yeah, so that's really why Mimi brought us into this class, but I think I got the most out of it. Just like I had no idea what I could do as a supporting partner other than like in the movies, right? The partner is just like holding her hand and then the person is like screaming their head off or whatever. And it totally empowered me to like understand there are a million things I could do and there's a million things I should do. And this is actually, like I mentioned, we have a lot of friends having babies, and now I feel like beta spraying like all this information at people like, oh my God, try and do this, like take this class. And like you can do comfort measures and trying to really help other people now with all this information that we've learned from you. So it's been such a great change.
Yeah, for me, it was more just like validating about the concerns I had about the healthcare system and showing that I could advocate for myself. And it's not a bad thing to ask questions and give informed consent that's actually informed. A lot of times I think we're just told to do things without being explained why. And I'm the kind of person that always asks why and what's the risk. And so the class really validated that, okay, here there is risk and here's the level of risk that we're looking at. And you can choose not to do it, but this was what might happen.
Yeah. This actually came up recently for us. Mimi, her dad recently found out that he has prostate cancer, and her parents are from China and don't speak English that well. So I think they had a very disempowering experience, like dealing with a doctor who was just trying to prescribe something and like get them out of there. And luckily, Mimi, I think probably in part because of this class, we were like, wait a minute, like questioning that too.
Yeah,
like,
I did my own research online. I talked to a lot of family physicians, and they're like, no, that's definitely the wrong treatment plan for early stage cancer. And so I went back, fought with the doctor, and we ended up getting a second opinion. And now he's no longer going with the first treatment plan, which I think would have been pretty bad for him at the time because he's still young and has a lot of life to live.
Yeah, it just really makes me want like an evidence-based class for everything now, like something for cancer, something for like pediatrics, and like there's so many potential black holes out there of like things we don't know.
It's so validating to hear you say that, because it is one of our primary goals for people taking the class is to kind of inspire a love of learning evidence-based information about all different kinds of topics so that you can take those kind of skills and researching and educating yourself and advocating and then apply it to like other aspects of your life, particularly with your elders. You know, that's been really important in my life. And having a background where I worked as a hospital nurse, I don't talk about this a lot, but I used to work in a medical surgical unit where we had a lot of elderly patients and people with chronic medical conditions. And I saw all the things that fell through the cracks and went wrong, and you know how important it is to have a family member there with you to advocate for you, and who's willing to ask questions. So we try not to sugarcoat it in the class. We're not anti-healthcare because I'm a nurse, but we don't sugarcoat things either. We say like you have to be able to advocate for yourself in any kind of system that you walk into.
Yeah,
and I was thinking, like, how can we advocate for ourselves during the labor process? Because we're both so stressed out. Like, I'm in the moment, you know, turning in, and then Trish was super stressed out. It was so good that we had Shalin, even though we had the quote unquote golden ticket with our midwives.
Yeah.
But had we been in the hospital, like, Shalin would have been so important to advocate for us because we wouldn't have been able to even speak out, even if we had the knowledge.
Yeah.
Just because of how, you know, fight or flight kind of stressed out we were in.
Yeah. Even with our home birth, there were some moments where Shaylin still like interjected and was, hey, wait a minute, is that really what you want? Or like, was it this other thing that we had talked about in our birth plan? And it really provided kind of an opportunity for me to to speak up and like do what we actually wanted for the birth.
So take us to the end of your pregnancy. We know you were planning a home birth. What was your mindset like right before you had the baby?
We were really stressed out because we had just moved from Oakland to Davis, and we were going through a home renovation at the time. We didn't have a kitchen. We didn't have cabinets. We didn't have floors. We didn't have paint. So all that had to be done while we were moving in still. So the house was under construction.
Yeah.
I was 7 months pregnant at the time. And kind of one thing led to another, but there was a lot of like really stressful moments towards the end where I was approaching my due date, and because we didn't have a kitchen, I was using a propane stove in the kitchen, and I did this really bad thing, which is install a propane canister in the middle of lighting, and it blew up basically on fire. And I was like crying, using the fire extinguisher, totally stressed out, putting the fire out. And I was just in tears because I thought I was putting my baby in danger, doing this thing it was an accident, but also because we just didn't have a kitchen and I was desperate to cook. So that led to a lot of cortisol, and my midwives were like, well, now the baby's probably going to be late and
On
not going to
top
come
of
out.
that, Mimi got poison oak. We took a baby moon up just near Sebastopol, near the coast, and we went mushroom foraging, and Mimi got poison oak. And it also like really aggravated the end of her pregnancy and like caused more stress. On top of that, you had pretty bad hemorrhoids throughout the third trimester.
Yeah, so they were very painful, like size of grapes, hemorrhoids. So the three things I think added up, and the baby was just very, very late. We were approaching 41 and a half weeks, and I knew that, by 42 weeks, we would have to go to the hospital. So we were doing everything we could in the books to try to stimulate labor, to induce labor naturally. So we were taking like evening primrose and alfalfa and dandelion tea.
And you got acupuncture a few times and like had these ear beads to do acupressure on your ears.
We did the acupressure. We did pineapple. Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Nipple stimulation. And then towards the end, our midwives gave us some options like castor oil. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. It's going to give me diarrhea. And we started walking a lot more, even though I had really bad hemorrhoids and it was painful.
Yeah.
And then at 41 and a half, I started getting early contractions for about a day, and it felt super minimum, kind of light period cramps. And my hemorrhoids were so bad that it kind of like masked everything anyway. So by the time I actually felt pain was pretty much approaching active labor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the middle of the night, Tuesday night. And we had just finished watching an episode of Netflix, and I was like, okay, I can't really sleep now. They're getting pretty heavy and intense.
Yeah.
So around like 1 a.m., I was like still awake, and we called our doula.
Yeah. Yeah. I think leading up to this, like we definitely got the room ready. So like the only like settled room in the house with all the other reno going on was our bedroom. So we had a tub just like waiting to go there, like propped up against the wall. And then they gave us like this giant duffel bag of a birth kit thing with like tarps and other kind of supplies, and then a box of like medical supplies. And then they gave us like a scavenger hunt list basically of things we needed to prepare in the house, a sheet pan and a pot for boiling water and like all these other things. So those were all like ready to go in the room.
Yeah, because I was already 41 and a half weeks pregnant. I had done everything to prepare for this baby to come. And we were just waiting around, like twiddling our thumbs.
Yeah.
Basically organizing everything in the baby room.
Yeah.
And
but
had
luckily,
nothing to do.
it gave us the time to also just like prepare the space like emotionally. Like Mimi put up photos of like her mom in childbirth and her aunt in childbirth, and photos of like just some adventures that Mimi did the PCT a few years back, and so like photos from those adventures or other like climbing trips, and like photos of our loved ones. And Shalin gave us like string lights, so we put like those and like
affirmations,
candles. Oh yeah, she printed these like really sweet affirmation cards, and we put those around the room as well. So everything was like ready, and we were just kind of like chilling and like waiting.
Yeah, and I had no real signs of going into labor, except I had a little bit of a bloody show, but like my water hadn't broken or anything.
Yeah, it's funny. We had appointment with the midwives when they were like, so castor oil or Davis Sutter, like these are what we're gonna have to do by Sunday if the baby doesn't show up. And that night was when the first kind of real contractions happened. And then the next morning it intensified. And then, yeah, as Mimi said, by that night, then it was like the real deal.
Mm-hmm. So when did the midwives get there?
So after Shalin got here, I had the TENS unit working to like bring some relief to the contractions. I had a shower Shalin recommended, which felt really, really good. I really wanted to hold off on calling the midwives because in my mind I was like, I don't want to waste their time if it's going to take a while, because they say it's supposed to be like 12, 24 hours in your first baby.
Yeah, we didn't have a couch or like any furniture in the living room. So we just felt bad. Like we didn't want them having to just hang out and wait around for us. So even in calling Shalin, knowing from both of these groups of people that they were like, no, absolutely, it's okay to call us literally anytime. That's our job. I still was like, I don't know. And I was like dilly-dallying. And like, it was 2 a.m. when we called Shalin, and I think like 4 or 5 a.m. when we called the midwives.
It kind of makes it more real when you have to call someone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so with Shalin here, we did all the, like, walking, try to walk down the hall, and I couldn't really do it. I was like, are you serious? You want me to walk right now? And I think looking back, I was definitely in active labor, but at the time I was like, no, don't call the midwives.
Yeah, and she was like vocalizing more, like learning the cues from the class of like, oh, she's turning inward, or like she can like barely talk at this point. And I was really knew things were getting real.
I was really nauseous.
Yeah.
Nauseous. I couldn't eat anything. I could barely drink much.
It's interesting, I guess, that we learned so much of all these like techniques from the class too, and yet in the moment it was still like, I think I was just getting very frantic. And like as soon as Shalin got there, she like immediately came up to Mimi and was touched her forehead and was, relax your jaw, relax your, like breathe,
Take
and like
deep
open your mouth, and immediately changed the tone of everything happening. And
Mm-hmm.
and that was so because it helped me calm down and remember what I was supposed to do to help Mimi. And even with the hip squeezes, I had been doing them like just kind of harshly on her. And when I saw Shalin do it, she just kind of like slowly applied pressure and then slowly released pressure with each wave, and then kind of like rubbed her hips to like make it less intense on Mimi, and that made such a huge difference too. So
it felt so good.
Helpful
with pain management. Yeah, I was definitely in a lot of pain by about 5 a.m. and I was like, can we get the midwives here to set up the tub ASAP?
Yeah.
So it took about 45 minutes to just fill the tub, and I couldn't get in until 6 a.m. So by 6 a.m., like I was finally in the tub, feeling a little bit better. But the contractions were so bad that I was like, it was hard for me to stay in there. And for a moment, I was like, no, let's go to the hospital. I can't do this.
Yeah.
It's been so long, and I don't even know if I'm like dilated yet.
We had a safe word, which was because Mimi didn't want like any interventions, basically, like other than these like comfort measures. And her safe word was banana. And she was like, there was a moment in the tub where she was like holding on to me and like just sobbing and like, I don't want to say banana, but I might have to say banana. And then like this whole process has also kind of been like, we've been joking that I'm going next in like 2 or 3 years. So like as somebody who can also get pregnant, I've been kind of like teetering back and forth like, oh my God, can I go through this? Like, I don't know if I could do that. Like so that like seems so intense.
This was her trial run to see if I could make it. And if everything went well, maybe she would consider a home birth.
Yeah. So Mimi's been like,
I felt like I had the pressure to like, make it smooth. And then in the moment, I think during transition, I had a break from my contractions. And as the sun was coming out, I was like, wow, this is like so beautiful. And I felt a sense of calm. And I finally opened my eyes and I looked around.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is so peaceful. And somehow I got to a point where I was like, hey, you know what? This doesn't hurt at all. And all the noises I'm making, that's just for effect. And I was like joking, and the midwives were all laughing. And I was like, just kidding. So it's, you can do it.
But it was just really sweet. Yeah. Even leading up to the home birth, because so many people had told us, no way, like I had a friend, she almost bled out and it was so good they were at the hospital and like all these things. So in the back of my mind before everything started, I was like, well, we could go into this and I could lose my wife and my baby and then I'll just be like stuck alone, and like this like nagging fear. And yet like when the midwives came, they consistently would come in and check like the heart, like I forget what the
baby heart.
Yeah, the audio thingy, and just be like, oh, nope, everything's good. Everything looks perfect. This is totally normal. And just completely put me at ease. Like, I didn't even worry after that point. And they were just so kind and so knowing about everything. And I think when Mimi was in the tub and it was getting hard for you, like, we were doing, like, the cold towels and, like, rotating through drinks, but you just like didn't feel like you were making any progress. And
the midwife said, well, do you want a cervical check? And I was like, what if it's not progressing? Like, I don't want to find out that, I'm like not dilated at all, because if that's the case, then I definitely can't do this because I already feel tired and I don't know if I can go on anymore. And they said, well, why don't you go ahead and just touch yourself, while you're in the tub? And so I reached down and I touched myself and I was like, that's weird. There's I don't feel anything hard. It's like squishy. And I feel like that's my cervix, so I'm not even dilated.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, like, why don't you get out so we can check you? So finally I got out of the tub around 8 a.m. And when they checked me, they were like, nope, that's your baby's head. And it was squishy because it was in the water bag still.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I was like, oh, thank God. I'm like, I can't, yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was
Yeah.
just so
You're almost to
surprised
the end.
at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah.
And I had the urge to push, so I was kind of like, I didn't know what was going on, why I would not have been fully dilated.
Yeah. And then I think getting out of the tub really helped just provide more gravity and move things forward. Because as soon as that happened, Mimi was like on the bed, on like, she tried both like hands and knees and then on her back.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny. So there were like 5 women in this room basically, and everybody like was holding a different limb, and like we were trying like different, like right leg
Angles.
up but like left leg down, or like left leg like tucked in, and just like all these like asymmetrical positions to help move the baby forward. And
And one
like,
of the midwives had my hemorrhoids held with a warm compress because I
yeah,
was afraid if I pushed, I was going to explode my
yeah,
hemorrhoids because I was in so much pain.
yeah, that was really good with lidocaine too.
Yeah.
So really helpful.
So I pushed for about an hour and a half in different positions and didn't feel like I was making a lot of progress. I remember thinking, oh my God, he's stuck, or the baby's stuck at the time. We didn't know the gender of the baby.
Yeah.
And, what if the shoulders are, impacted or something?
Yeah.
Why is it not coming down? I was really running out of energy. And
Yeah.
so finally I was like, okay, let me try on hands and knees again because I feel like that gives the baby more room because my hips were feeling like they were going to explode. They were just so tight and felt like, as the baby was moving down, it was squeezing my hips out. And even just like the hip squeezes were no longer working for me because I felt like I had bruises on my hips from being squeezed so much.
Yeah. That was my opportunity too, because before that, when Mimi was like on her back, I was behind her and like holding her and like massaging her shoulders. But I wanted to catch the baby, and the midwives at that point were like, "Oh, I think you're in a good position there, so we'll catch the baby. Like, don't worry about it." And that's when Shalin was like, "I don't know, like maybe we can rearrange things." So when Mimi got up, I was able to like get back to like kind of catching position too. So that it was like really, really perfect and worked out really well.
Yeah, and the moment that Trish went back there, I think gave me the mental permission to push harder. Because also I knew she wanted to catch the baby, and I was like, well, I don't want to push too hard until she got back there. And then right when she got back there, like a couple big pushes, I got the baby out, kind of like a hike,
Like quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah. The midwives have been using a mirror too to help Mimi kind of like see what was happening. And like when I finally got out there so I could see, it was like the coolest thing. It was just like this blue glowing bubble with like this massive hair underneath, and looked like a little space helmet or something. It was just so cool. And
because the bag of waters was still intact.
Yeah, still intact. And I'd never seen anything like this. And like, I know a lot of people were like warning us, it's really traumatizing. You might pass out. Like, don't get too sucked. But I was just like in awe and like so amazed to see how strong Mimi was, how resilient she'd been through the whole thing, and knowing her legs were cramping or like her hips were hurting and like everything, and she was still like kind of continuing on. This is kind of classic Mimi, I would say. She really enjoys type 2 fun, which is like where you're like suffering through it and have like a really amazing outcome. I mentioned like she'd done the PCT before, and like we rock climb a lot. So we've been using all these visualization techniques to remind her, you can do this. Like you've like hiked through the desert without water. Like you've done all these things. Your body is capable of doing this, and just being able to witness it was really, really inspiring for me. And like, yeah, it makes me love her like so much more. Like just knowing what she's done for our family, and like all the pain, even through postpartum, everything that she's gone through it's so amazing. So
yeah, and Trish and I had done like one big epic climb together, and she would use those words reminding me of that climb as imagery when I was really struggling and thinking, okay, this is not going to work. It's going to last forever. Like, I don't know if I could do it. She would just say like, hey, we're almost at the top, like you can see the bottom. We're about to head down. And, she was just continuing to like hold me and give me massages like the whole time without any breaks for the full like 7 hours. And I was just like, oh my God, I need to hurry up.
Yeah. I didn't realize, but I was so wrecked for the next couple of days. Like every muscle hurt. I was just like constantly like, there were points when, because Shalin and I would tag team But like around the tub where neither of us could reach both of her hips at once, we were just like each pushing one hip. So all of my arms hurt, my legs were hurt from bracing, and yeah, it was a pretty intense workout, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the water never broke until his shoulders came out, and then the whole team was splashed with his
Yeah.
waters.
Yeah, it was, I don't know why, but so Shaylin took video of this luckily, and I got a time lapse of the whole event, which was really fun just to kind of watch back and see. But the video of the actual like baby catch, I don't know why I didn't anticipate this, but I was like, oh my God, there's a baby. I was like, it's a baby. Like, where did this come from? Like,
And he did like a somersault
Yeah, he
coming out.
totally-
He was definitely like,
we found out he had a short cord, which
yeah.
is an asynclet.
he was asynclitic, so his head was a
Asynclitic.
little tilted, came out, and the midwives were saying like he was born at 6 pounds 10 ounces, but his head made it look like or feel like a 10-pound baby
Because the
'cause
way
it
it
was
was
so
angled.
sideways.
Yeah.
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 So it might have
Like-
explained why it was a little bit more difficult for you at the end. With
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, an hour and a half of pushing. I did not imagine that it would be that bad.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I had some second degree tears, so I had some stitches and definitely a lot of pain in the postpartum because of that.
Yeah.
So what was it like finally having baby on the outside?
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Yeah, it
We were
was-
crying.
yeah.
We were like, "Oh my God, it's a boy. What do we do?"
Yeah, we had no idea. It was- So yeah, and I mean, we're both cis women, and I was like, I don't know how to deal with a boy. Like, I don't understand anything that happens down
She
there.
only has like girl nieces.
yeah, we have nieces, so
But
yeah.
we learned.
Yeah, I mean, 8 weeks in now, we're like, oh, okay, he's peed on me a ton, but we're getting way better at
Anticipating.
Yeah, and like knowing how to take care of him, at least as a baby for now.
I don't know if you use this trick, but I learned that the exposure to air is what triggers them to pee. So you like
Oh.
open the diaper and then let them get some air down there and then put the diaper back on top of it. And then that catches the pee as they inevitably go, and then you change it. So
Yeah.
that was my
Smart.
trick.
That's a
I've
good
also
one.
heard the trick where you put the wet wipe on top of the penis,
Mhm.
and that triggers a little pee
Really, 'cause
also.
it's
'cause
cold.
it's cold.
If it's
Yeah, cold or air, either works. So you have this amazing little boy. What was your postpartum experience like?
Oh my God,
Oh man,
amazing.
This is the other like incredible thing about one home birth and two midwives. Like we were just in bed. Like I still once in a while I'm holy shit, everything happened here. Like when we were like in bed and I'm like, this is right where this baby came out. And
Even the day of the birth,
yeah,
like after everything happened, they cleaned up while we were in bed with the baby, trying to nurse, learning how to nurse and doing skin to skin.
Yeah, this
During
is-
that golden hour, they just took care of everything. They cleaned the kitchen, they cleaned our bedroom. It looked like nothing had happened
This
by
is
the
the-
time they left.
the best part of the time lapse is like you can see all this happening. You can see them come in and like Shaylin helped set up the tub and then they filled the tub and then there's like this immediate like erasure of everything. Like they just the midwives mentioned somebody called them like a pit crew. Like they just come in and like instantly clean everything up. But there's a moment where I'm like holding the baby and I'm lying in bed and they're like they changed the bed with me in the bed still and they just scooted me over and then like scooted the sheets over and then like it's like this funny rotation. And then, yeah, they did the baby check just like at the foot of our bed. And we just stayed in bed, I think, the entire day, basically barely got up. And
Yeah.
I remember just like lying there and like Mimi and the baby were sleeping. And outside the window, like it was raining and then it started hailing. And it was just so like surreal and magical. And just these incredible women had come and like been so supportive and loving and so kind to us throughout this entire process. And then helped us and helped make sure we were okay and then just like excuse themselves and like let us be a family unit together. And
Yeah. But they were there the next day. That was
Yeah.
their first baby checkup and mama checkup.
Mhm.
And they came 3 times in the first week, and then they came once every 2 weeks after that. And so we were constantly being looked after, and we were, asked how we were doing every time they came. And we didn't have to leave the house.
yeah.
And during COVID, that was the best. And also during postpartum, because I had a really hard time walking around the first 3 weeks even. And I was just like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I don't have to drive anywhere right now.
Yeah. I didn't even know that this isn't a thing that normal
Hospitals.
hospitals offer. Like that for the actual birthing parent, they don't like really check up on them until like 6 weeks. And I'm like, but you just went through such a traumatic event, and how could you not, like, it seemed like such an important thing that they were constantly there, like helping tend to your wounds and like check your stitches and like all these things. So
And even with a hospital birth, it would be helpful if there was home visits afterwards,
Yeah.
So my sister is a family doctor, and she's one of the only doctors I know who still makes home visits, and she
Oh, wow.
always does home visits with her newborn
That's amazing.
patients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's
That's
really
so great.
important. She says it's really important for all the
Yeah.
reasons you just said. It's hard for you to leave the home, you're
Yeah.
recovering, and then she gets to come to you, and it just makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found out too, so BirthStream, they do postpartum visits even if you don't have a home birth now.
Yes.
So that's such a nice offering, and like definitely something I'm gonna tell like our friends about and stuff.
Yeah.
It's so nice. I don't even know. I was joking with my friends about how they just kind of like tucked us into bed and like gave us a plate of snacks and then left, and they were all like, I want that just like normally, not because I'm pregnant, just because it seems so nice. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why people don't consider home births more, but I hope that our story does inspire people. I know that like cost is one of the things, but BirthStream actually takes insurance. They take our insurance, and if you don't have insurance, they take a cash pay option as well. And I can imagine that it's a lot less expensive than the hospital would charge.
Yeah. And just really impacted, I think, our mental health and made us feel way more safe throughout the entire process. I totally would agree. Like, it was a golden ticket option. Everything that we had learned from your class, and when they asked us about it, they were like, oh, what do you want for vitamin K? Or like, oh, how do you feel about circumcision? And they were totally aligned with all of our decisions. They were like, yeah, that seems totally fine, and stuff like that. So,
do you have any advice for people listening who are planning on entering birth or parenthood soon?
I mean, I think if you have the privilege to do a home birth, I mean, if you don't have any complications with your pregnancy, it's definitely an option that you could consider. And I think that just having that as an option makes you think about like how to advocate for yourself more so. And you can always go to the hospital like as an emergency backup plan. But yeah, I think having that as an option and being able to think about what are your choices, what is it that's most beneficial for you and your family, instead of just thinking, oh, I have to just go to the hospital. I know it's not available to everyone and that maybe there's no midwives in their area, but it is becoming, I think, more popular, especially with COVID.
yeah.
And hopefully it'll stick around more as laws change, because I know there's a lot of barriers to midwives practicing just because of the laws that the medical community has put in place.
Yeah. Personally, like as someone who is planning on getting pregnant, like in a few years, this definitely changed my opinion completely. I started off in the camp of, I don't know, like maybe hell no. And at this point, I'm like, that was such an empowering and incredible experience that Mimi went through. And like, I think I want to try that. And I think that maybe my body can handle that. And I guess that is my takeaway from this, is that, I mean, we're just like regular people. So it's like, I feel like anybody's bodies can do this. Like any birthing parent is capable of doing this. Like even the TV and like media makes it seem like, oh, epidural is like the only way to go. And even if we had done like an unmedicated birth in a hospital, I think it would have been possible. And I'm just so surprised that that is something that I am saying right now, because I was not at all like open to that opinion before.
I think the media just has normalized Pitocin and epidurals as the way to go if you don't want pain. But your body is totally capable of making all the oxytocin that you need to get through it. And you just kind of like block it out after. So it's one time in your life that you go through this really, really amazing experience.
Yeah.
And it is empowering, because after the birth, I was like, wow, I could do anything. Like, I feel like a rock star,
Yeah.
and I got through it.
It's funny. Mimi's like compared this on a pain scale, and she's like, "Oh, the birth, at least it was done." Like, and then postpartum was an entire other like really painful experience.
Yeah.
And getting to see all of this, I'm like, I am so impressed with all parents ever in the world, because of the things that people do for like breastfeeding and like taking care of these babies. It's really, I'm in awe and respect. I have newfound respect for folks.
Yeah. The other advice is to get a doula if you have if it's accessible to you and you have the ability to. Because like I said before, when you're in the moment, like if we were in the hospital, even though we had the knowledge from evidence-based birth, like we would not have been able to have be in the right mindset to speak up for ourselves, I think. I definitely wouldn't have been able to for myself.
Yeah.
So just having that third party person to check in with you, to advocate for you, to give you a helping hand with, all the comfort measures like hip squeezes, give you a break, give my wife a break from her duties. That was super, super helpful.
Yeah.
Well, it's been super amazing listening to your story. I've just loved every minute of it. So thank you so much for letting us vicariously experience your birth with you. It was so beautiful. Do you have any questions for me? Is there any way I can help you today?
Yeah. I guess we had two things. Like, I really going through this experience, knowing that the healthcare system has such inequity. How do we as regular people advocate for more people to have access to midwives, to doulas, especially postpartum care? I know we're really lucky that both of our employers gave us a very generous bonding leave with our baby, but I know that other folks have to go back to work after 2 or 3 weeks or whatever the minimum amount is, and that's just wild to me, knowing that Mimi was barely able to walk at that point. So I'm just curious how we can help advocate for that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I was reaching out to my network to look for resources for you. So there's a couple of different topics about postpartum that are really important. One is obviously postpartum care and having increased visits and support. Another is postpartum doulas. That's a really important option. Another access issue is to nutrition. Nutritious food plays a really important role in healing, as you may have experienced, experiencing a tear, or if you've had surgery, having nutritious food. And then, like you said, there's also access to midwives and maternity leave or gestational leave or perinatal leave for both the birthing body and their partner. And so there's a variety of organizations working on this. One thing that I found interesting that you might appreciate is because it looks like it's based in California, is Mothers for Mothers Postpartum Justice Project. Their website is m2mpostpartum.org. And you can look at, they started in 2014 and they kind of have had different phases that they've worked for. They initially focused on publishing recipes for postpartum of immigrant and refugee Asian American women. Nice. And they published a multicultural, multilingual recipe book that features different Asian recipes for traditional postpartum. And then phase 2, they created a website. They created a course at UC Berkeley. They hosted a summit, and they defined postpartum justice, which I haven't seen defined elsewhere. So they defined postpartum justice as, quote, the set of values forming the foundation of postpartum care that is fair and equitable. It is free from sexism, racism, and a healthcare system based on profit. Postpartum justice recognizes society's collective responsibility for all parents of new babies. It distills the postpartum wisdom of the past and transforms it to serve the future, end quote. So it looks like now they're moving into their phase 3 projects, which includes Nourish, which is rebuilding a community to support new moms in the Black and Indigenous communities by making postpartum nourishment and food accessible and available and affordable, as well as other projects that they're doing. So that looked like a really cool option. And so one thing that I encourage people to do whenever you want to get involved is go see what is being done locally near you. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, but find people who are already doing the work and then ask them how you can help, donate, get involved, get on their email list so you get their updates. Just kind of basic starting to educate yourself on what's going on. Because there's lots of networks, people, and we can list some of them in the show notes. There's an association in Chicago called Chicago Volunteer Doulas that deploys postpartum doulas into the community at no cost to anyone who needs it. The Military Birth Resource Network is an advocacy group advocating for maintaining continuity of care through military moves. There's so many other places. There's one called Fourth Trimester Arizona, It's a nonprofit shedding light on what postpartum really looks like. There's also a really important foundation called Postpartum Support International, or PSI. They have a website called postpartum.net, and they have virtual parent support groups for LGBTQ families, military families, dads, partners, BIPOC families, Spanish-speaking groups, Black mom groups, etc. So I think especially with COVID, there's been a wealth of virtual groups popping up to support people. So part of it is that like emotional support as well. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful for you to kind of open your eyes as to like what's going on. And reproductive justice is a topic that includes everything from deciding whether or not to have children to, you know, helping raise your children in the postpartum period. So technically the whole postpartum period falls right into the concept of reproductive justice, which there's been lots of books written on. So that's something you can also use that as a keyword when you're looking to educate yourself.
Yeah, that's really incredible. I'm so glad those groups exist, and that there's one so local to us. So we'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that like evidence-based birth should be something that is accessible to everyone. Yeah. And those scholarships really, really help. I don't know if you play a part in providing that to Shalin, but I know like a lot of my friends probably wouldn't take this class if it were, they had to pay full price for it, because it is pretty expensive.
Yeah, thankfully that we have a number of instructors. We encourage them, not all of them do, but a number of instructors do offer scholarships and sliding scales. And then we also have scholarships and sliding scales to recruit more Black and brown birth workers into the instructor program.
Oh, great. That's amazing.
So we're in the process right now of judging applications and getting people enrolled into that program, because families of color often feel more comfortable and have better experiences when they're taught by an instructor with a similar background to them. So that's one of our top priorities. And then another thing that we're working on is connecting with nonprofits who want to supply those instructors of color with grants so that they can teach free classes in their communities.
Wow.
So there's a lot more nonprofits that are looking into getting into this. And if you're listening and you have one, you can feel free to email support at evidencebasedbirth.com, and we can connect you with instructors who are open to receiving, you know, grants to their small business that they can then teach for free to families of color in their community.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's so
Thank
amazing.
you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Mimi and Trish, for coming on the podcast. We appreciate
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
So fun, and like so fun getting to relive the experience through this too. So I appreciate it.
Wow, thank you all for listening to that incredible, empowering birth story from Trish and Mimi. I mentioned that we are currently accepting applications to the instructor program, so if that's something you're interested in, we are accepting applications for a few more weeks. You can go to evidencebasedbirth.com/instructor to learn more. Next week, we have a special interview with Stephanie Tillman of The Feminist Midwife, and I'm really excited to share that episode with you. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Bye. This podcast episode was brought to you by the book Babies Are Not Pizzas, They're Born Not Delivered. Babies Are Not Pizzas is a memoir that tells the story of how I navigated a broken healthcare system and uncovered how I could still receive evidence-based care. In this book, you'll learn about the history of childbirth and midwifery, the evidence on a variety of birth topics, and how we can prevent preventable trauma in childbirth. Babies Are Not Pizzas is available on Amazon as a Kindle, paperback, hardcover, and Audible book. Get your copy today and make sure to email me after you read it to let me know your thoughts.